We will vote in a few minutes to move forward with the Defense and Labor HHS Education Appropriating Bill. It probably sounds like a pretty unusual combination, even though I think most voters, most taxpayers understand that to get this work done in the time frame we have to do it, we generally need to bring more than one topic together on the floor at the same time. But why defense and labor, health and human services and education? Well, first of all, that's 62% of all the spending. If we can get this bill passed today, get a conference with the House, get this single bill on the president's desk by the end of the fiscal year, we will have funded that much of the government in a timely way for the first time in a decade. If we can add the other bills to it that the House and Senate have passed, we'll have 90% of the spending on the president's desk and in place before the spending year starts. Now, it doesn't sound like that'd be a very big accomplishment, but in the standards of the last decade, it would be an incredible accomplishment to bring these bills to the floor, to allow them to be debated, allow them to be amended. We have a manager's package that would include a number of the 60 or so proposed amendments just on the labor, health and human services education part of the bill. Don't know how that's exactly going to work out today, but I do know that we can take that manager's package to the conference and say this is what we agreed to as a manager's package. Whether we officially are able to add it or not, every bit of it is germane to the bill, germane, in my view, to what could happen in conference. But I'd also point out, Madam President, that for decades, the priority of my side of the aisle, of our side of the aisle, has been defend the country first as the #1 priority. One of the top priorities on the other side of the aisle has been, well, let's take the biggest of the non-defense bills and be sure we're equally prioritizing it. And so in my view, for perhaps the first time this has ever happened, the leaders have decided to bring these two top priorities to the floor together and let voters, Democrats and Republicans, voters on the Senate floor, decide how they want to move forward with those bills. Let me just talk for a few minutes about one of the items in our bill, the Labor, Health and Human Services Subcommittee, Education Committee you and I serve on, and that would be healthcare research and specifically Alzheimer's and how it relates to that research. First of all, for a dozen years, ending 4 years ago, there had not been a penny of increase in health research. When I became chairman of this committee 4 years ago, Senator Murray and I began to work on reprioritizing healthcare research. Democrats and Republicans getting together to figure out what we needed to do for at least the first couple of years. What we needed to do was eliminate other programs and combine other programs and make tough choices to really be sure that health research was a priority. When we pass this bill today, Madam President, we will have increased health research spending in a budget that for 2 years had no growth at all and has had some growth in the last two, but by 30%. 30%, from $30 billion a year to $39 billion a year at a time when we know more about the human genome, we know more about what makes each of us differently from all the rest of us than we have before. And what are we beginning to see? We're seeing things in immunotherapy in cancer. We're seeing things in the brain research. We're not seeing the kind of results we want to see yet in Alzheimer's, but we're moving in that direction. Every hour, Alzheimer's disease costs taxpayers at least $21 million every single hour. Someone in the United States is developing Alzheimer's every 65 seconds. We're spending somewhere in the neighborhood of 277 billion tax dollars a year on Alzheimer's and dementia-related care. Now, I've just given 3 numbers. It's hard to talk about appropriated without giving numbers, but numbers are not really maybe the most riveting thing, particularly when you start talking about millions or billions or even trillions. What does that really mean? That really means that we're spending basically half of the defense, an amount equal to half of the defense budget on Alzheimer's and dementia-related care. Just the overwhelming impact of that. If we don't do something differently than we're doing it right now, just because of the projected long life and demographics of the country, in 2050, which is 32 years from now, we'll be spending, in today's dollars, $1.1 trillion on Alzheimer's and dementia care. 1.1 trillion. 1.1 anything, who knows? Let's go back to defense again. That's twice the defense budget of last year. Twice the defense budget. Now, I don't really have a great grasp of what $1.1 trillion is, but I do have a sense of what every military base everywhere in the world would be, and add to that every ship, every plane, every piece of equipment, and add to that every training dollar, add to that every paycheck for every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, person in the National Guard, the Coast Guard, the reserves. You're beginning to approach a pretty big number. But we'd be spending more than twice that amount, if you add up all I just talked about, more than twice that just on taxpayer spending on Alzheimer's and dementia. Obviously, there is a huge taxpayer need to find a solution here. There is even a bigger individual need. You know, it's not only a devastating disease for people that have it, it's a devastating disease for the people that care about them. There's one generally used number out there that says for every tax dollar we're spending on Alzheimer's and dementia right now, we're spending 2 private dollars, almost never insured. This is caregivers, this is people who care about you, who give up part or all of their career and time to take care of you instead of doing what they otherwise would be doing. And you may be the person being taken care of, may not have any real idea at some point of what's going on, but the people taking care of them know. That's a big reason to find a solution here. If we could just delay onset of Alzheimer's, if we could figure out how to come up with something that would slow down the onset of that disease, if we could delay onset by an average of 5 years, we'd cut that $1.1 trillion by 42%, almost in half. If we could just have the average person that gets Alzheimer's get it 5 years later than they're getting Alzheimer's today, almost half, 42% of that $1.1 trillion would go away. So this is something that obviously we need to prioritize. Just 4 years ago, we were spending about $600 million on Alzheimer's research. So we were spending $250 billion on taxpayer-related care. We were spending $600 million. What is that? Is that 0.25%? $600 million on research to try to help solve this problem that we're spending these billions of dollars on every year. So that number has gotten, we have in 4 years got that number beyond the disease goal a handful of years ago of, if we just could have $2 billion on Alzheimer's research every year, we could begin to have a better chance to find the solution. Well, this year we passed the $2 billion, we're at $2.34 billion. but we're still spending less than 1% on trying to find a solution to the problem of what we're spending every year on the problem, but it's an important 1%. At Washington University in St. Louis, which I didn't know when I started chairing this committee, what a great leader they were in this research effort. I knew they were one of the top health research universities in the country. I didn't know where we were cutting edge-wise on Alzheimer's, but Dr. Randy Bateman at Washington University in St. Louis is very close, has unveiled the results of a blood test that hopefully would detect early on whether you should individually, whether you're on the way to developing this problem or not. Now, obviously that matters if we can find things that you could do that would significantly slow down the advance of this disease. It's not expensive, particularly to take a blood test. It's not very invasive. It gets a quick result. You know, now what do you have to do? You have to have a CAT scan, somebody in an expensive process look at your brain and figure out if you've got amyloids developing in your brain that are likely to cause this. So early detection, Dr. Hodis at the National Institute of Aging at NIH says one of the real reasons we can't find solutions is we can't figure out how to get the right group to clinically test. A blood test would help with that. So we're working on that. I see my friend Senator Markey is here. I would point out to him that because of the leader's time, I only started talking about 8 minutes ago, and maybe I only have 2 minutes right now. If you want to use that 2 minutes before the vote, but we do have a vote, and then we'll figure out later maybe how to get back to your time. But thanks for your interest in health research. Certainly, Dr. Blumenthal, your wife is a great advocate of this. And why don't I just yield this last minute or so I have to Senator Markey, and then maybe there'll be other time later, but I know we've got a vote scheduled in a minute.